Hello, everyone. Welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener in the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I am enjoying this mild winter is continuing, and so it's going to be really, really interesting how the rest of the spring and things shape up. Now, I never trust May, though, because our spring, to me, we can still get spring frosts. And so for those that are getting itching to do some gardening, I'm not going to plant our tomatoes, cucumbers, and the things that like it warm. I'm not going to plant those until the last half of May again, because I don't trust. I mean, it's been very nice, but I'm not looking at planting some of those things too early. And that's why I'm anxious today to talk about tomatoes, pickles, peppers, and some of the things such as that.
Yeah, it's kind of unusual. We don't talk a lot about we talk about a lot about vegetables and growing things that we want to eat, but we don't always talk about the process for after we pull them out of the ground and even planning what to pull in the ground for what you want to do with them. So we don't talk about canning a lot and making pickles, especially this time of year. But there's a reason that we're going to do that, because today we've got a guest on, Rita Ussatis, from the North Dakota State University Extension Family and Community Wellness Agent for Cass County. Welcome, Rita.
Thank you for having me and letting me join this podcast. I'm really excited to talk about the correct varieties of plants you should be planting so you can have a successful canning season.
Now, Rita's office is right across from my office. And in the late summer, during canning season, pickling season, oftentimes I'll hear Rita getting phone calls from people such as, and I hear Rita mention, so your pickles didn't do so well. What variety did you plant? And, it often turns out that they planted a variety that doesn't make good pickles. So anyway, I thought, let's get ahead of the game here. Okay, because when a person finds out that your tomato wasn't the best variety to process, or your pickles weren't the best variety, at that time, you can't go back 3 months and plant the right variety. So I thought, let's get ahead of this and let's discuss with Rita what the best varieties are. So to plant those, so shop at the garden center, pick off the seed rack the varieties that are best, and then when it comes canning and pickling time, you'll be ahead of the game. You'll have planted the varieties that are best.
And we've talked about how many hundreds of varieties of tomatoes there are, and we've talked mostly about like slicing tomatoes and things that we would cut up and put in a salsa or something like that. We've not talked about canning at all.
And so that's why there are so many different varieties. And so it's great to visit with you, Rita, about trying to select some of the things that will make the best product when it comes time.
Just to kind of put this into context, talk a little bit about you and your history with canning. How long have you been canning?
Well, I have been canning since I was a 4-H member.
Okay.
And that was back in the 1970s.
Okay.
And so my mom, we had a large garden and I grew up on a farm, and we canned all our produce for the next winter. So I have been canning for many, many years. But in my role in extension, which I've been in for over 37 years, canning is our forte, and we teach a lot of canning classes, and we have always answered questions. And so a long time I've been involved in it, and so I can actually talk about a lot of mistakes people make when they can just basically call me and I was like, yep, that's what you did. And they were like, well, how do you know that without seeing the product?
How popular is canning now compared to when it was in the 70s? Because I grew up around, my mom would do a lot of canning too.
So in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, it was really popular. And it was like I couldn't get off the phone because that's how busy it was with people calling with questions. And then like in the early 2000s, it kind of fell off. But since about 2015 or so, it has picked up. There's a real push that people want to know where their food's coming from, grow their own food, and know what's in their food. So it has really come around again in the last 5 to 10 years.
Along with that surge in gardening. Lots of gardening, even small space gardens. And so along with that, people are growing more food and deciding how to can it or process it safely.
with obviously with when the I shouldn't say obviously, but when the pandemic hit, there was a big, huge boom in gardening, and
Victory Gardens were back.
And so, did you also see just a real spike in interest after 2020?
Yeah, we really did. But our problem in 2020 was there was no canning lids.
There were shortages, right?
There was shortages.
I remember that. We had a hard time.
That was a real problem then.
Why was that?
It's just because the metal manufacturers. And so if you found canning lids, that was like hitting the gold mine. And so we were actually teaching people how to freeze foods because we had all these gardens happening and they wanted to preserve their own food. So you don't have to just can in jars. You can freeze food, you can dehydrate food, you can dry food. So we had a lot of different methods back in the, like in the 20s. So that's when it's really started really big again, and it's huge again.
It was nice to see canning lids back on the shelf last year again.
Yeah.
Well, I know my sister, she lives down in St. Paul, and she would be texting every once in a while, like, score, that she found like a small little box.
Yeah,
I did that.
Mary sent me out often looking for lids.
I did that one time too. I happened to be out, and I sent Dawn a message, score, I found lids.
She found lids.
And you can find jars, and especially you can find jars, I should say used, but you can obviously, but like in thrift stores, sometimes there'll be boxes of jars, but really the lids are, and you really need to have the really good seal.
But I didn't want to buy all new jars just to get the lid on top.
And the thing is, you can reuse jars,
right?
But you have to have a new lid every time you process food. So
because we've used the same jars for decades and decades.
Well, let's kind of jump in. Let's start talking about. Let's start with tomatoes. I would imagine, and you can correct me, but I would imagine that tomatoes are maybe the most popular thing to can.
Tomatoes are more popular, and the most popular product is salsa.
Okay.
And so everyone wants to invent their own salsa recipe because some want it hotter and some want it milder, and some like this flavor and some like that flavor. So we have some precautions, some canning your own salsa, which we won't get into today, but you want to start with the right tomato.
Right.
So if you like a thicker salsa, you want to use a paste variety of tomato. So I'm going to let Dawn talk about the varieties that are good paste tomatoes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so, what makes a good paste tomato, of course, is more solids. Do I have that right, Rita?
Mm-hmm.
More solids in it and less juice. And so for a good paste tomato, and now a good reference for everyone on some of these varieties is this is work done by North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for the western part of North Dakota, Tom Kalb. Okay, and so a good resource and it's quite easy to look up online. It's simply vegetable cultivars for North Dakota. Vegetable cultivars for North Dakota. So if you jot that down, take a look at it. It gives all the vegetables, and it's redone yearly. So you take a look. It's brand new for 2024, these varieties, and it will tell you everything from carrots to zucchini and everything in between. So anyway, the tomato section on it is broken down by kind of these slicing type tomatoes and the paste type tomatoes. And so these are varieties that Tom has tried in North Dakota. They're actually sent out to gardeners to try these and etc. So by no means it's the only list. I think there's 15,000 tomato varieties. And so, but these are some of those that have proven really good for the state. But, if your favorite variety isn't on here, it doesn't mean you can't grow it. Okay, so for paste tomatoes, for example, Roma, of course, Roma tomato, that's been around for generations. There are some improvements. There's one called Roma VF, that stands for some disease resistance. Also a paste type, Roma type, Viva Italia.
Okay.
That's a very good one. One called Grenadero. That is great. And there's one that I want to try, a new one called Super Sauce. I'm going to try that, and I'm sure Tom will be trying that also. But again, that is for trial. And also other types of paste-type tomatoes. There are some like Amish paste, San Marzano. A lot of these have kind of Italian type names.
Yeah, well, and I guess
with the pizza sauce, all the different sauces type
and
things.
when we're talking about paste tomatoes, I mean, we're just basically thinking to think of tomato paste. I would imagine, because you were saying you want something that's going to be a little thicker and a little, something you're almost going to need a utensil to.
Right, that's correct. So that's what. So if you want a thicker salsa or or tomato paste that you want to can or a ketchup, you'll want to use the paste tomatoes.
Yeah.
However, if you want to just can like the whole tomatoes or tomato juice or a runnier product, if you want a runnier salsa, because that's what I prefer is
Okay.
a thinner salsa, you want to use a slicing tomato.
Okay.
So they're just fine too if you want a runnier, slicier tomato product. And so we have varieties of those, and a lot of this comes down to growing days too. So first we're going to talk about the slicing tomato varieties that do well in North Dakota, but then we're going to talk a little bit about the growing days, because this is where most people come into a little bit of a problem.
And of course, the slicing tomatoes, excuse me, that's one of our favorite ways of eating tomato. We can't wait to get these nice big slicers. And of course, we love canning tomatoes too. But for the slicing tomatoes, those on the recommended North Dakota list are Big Beef Plus. Now, Big Beef has been around for a while. If you notice that plus behind it, that means it's the color has actually been improved a bit. The flavor is even better, and it has even more disease resistance. So Big Beef Plus, Celebrity Plus, those are the two that Mary and I enjoyed growing greatly. The Mountain series, such as Mountain Fresh Plus, Mountain Merit, those are all good. And so those would be among the slicers. Some of the beef steak types, certainly good. And so that's what makes a good slicing type tomato. Now, Rita, you also mentioned the growing days.
Yeah, so the tomatoes all grow. Some of them can mature within 52 days, and some at 75 days. So
that's a pretty big gap.
It's a really big gap. So what you want to do when you're because you have to start your seeds now so you can transplant your tomatoes. So if you happen to transplant them June 1st, 52 days, be ready by the first part of August to do your salsa. But if you haven't planted your peppers and you want your peppers at the same time, there could be a gap of 30 days there. So you'll want to also look at the growing days for the different varieties. So we can do several varieties in your garden. So you can have an early one that you can can within 60 days, or you can have a late canning season of 75 days. And we have some growing days.
And so you mentioned planting your own. So for peppers, peppers require a little more seed days in the seed tray and the little cell pack than tomatoes do. So peppers are usually seeded March 15th. So we're coming up on the good time to seed peppers. So for people that like to grow your own plants, that's a target date. Peppers seed March 15th indoors. As we've talked about seeding, under lights works beautifully for peppers. And then tomatoes, the target date is April 1st. And by seeding them at that time, you will have a plantable transplant towards the end of May. Again, that's both of those are very frost tender. They'll be killed at 32 degrees. So that's why we always delay sometime the last half of May. There's nothing wrong with waiting till the end of May to transplant those out because the soil's warmer, the temperatures are warmer. And so anyway, but if you don't want to start the seeds yourself, of course, you can buy these tomatoes at the garden centers or pepper plants from the garden centers. You still transplant them out at the same time. But on the tags or in the seed catalogs, if you start your own seed, you'll notice days to maturity. And that's the number of days from transplanting out into the garden until you get the first harvestable fruit. Now, it depends on the weather, the heat and things like that. But the number of days lets you classify that variety as an early, a mid-season, or a late. Okay, so an early tomato, and it's fun to have some early tomatoes. The early tomatoes will be, there are some even 45 days. They might not be very big, but they ripen early, okay, up to about maybe 65 days. So 45 days up to about 65 days. Those would be classed as the early, okay. Then the mid-seasons, and I call those our main season. So those would be at about 65, maybe to 75 days. Okay, and so for Mary and I, for canning, we want lots of tomatoes at canning time. So we want them to be kind of that mid-season, main season. So we choose the ones like Big Beef, Celebrity, and others that are going to fall within those days. Then the late types are going to be maybe 78 or 75, 78 days, all the way up to 100. There are some tomatoes that don't ripen for 100 days, and those are going to be very late. So if you want to be canning and processing in August, say, is that when you usually figure tomatoes processing?
We really figure tomatoes in August.
In August, yeah. So you probably want to focus most of your tomatoes on that main season, 65 to 75 day varieties. And so when choosing your varieties, it's important to look for that. And of course, plant some of the late big ones too. That's fine. But you wouldn't want to put all your eggs, your tomato eggs in one basket by planting all late. Otherwise, when everybody else is canning, you're still waiting for green tomatoes.
So in my mom and dad's garden, that's where I, pluck all my produce from.
Yep.
We do some early ones and some mid-season ones.
Okay.
So we can spread it out so it's not all there the same week. So that's another good hint, is to kind of spread it out through the season. So all of a sudden 1 week you have to do everything. So
that's a good point. Otherwise, that can make a busy time.
It can make a real busy time.
If everything is all coming ripe at the same time.
Talking about canning tomatoes, talk a little bit about the role acid plays in canning a tomato.
So when we're canning, there's several methods, but basically it's hot water bath or pressure canning. And when we take a look at that, you need to have a good acidity level to make it safe so you can hot water bath it. So when you pressure can it, you need to have a higher temperature to kill the enzymes and bacteria that make you sick. So with tomatoes, it's recommended. You have to do it. You need to add acid to your tomatoes, and that's lemon juice.
Okay.
And it's not fresh lemon juice you squeeze. It's bottled lemon juice because we know what the concentration of that is. And so it's depends on pints or quarts how much you add it into it. And every variety of tomato has a different acidity level. And the other thing that's really interesting with this is they did research on this, and the same variety planted in Fargo and the same plant variety in Williston had different acidity levels.
That's fascinating.
Is it because of the soil then?
Because of the soil.
Sure.
Okay.
And so that's why we need to add acid to our tomatoes, usually in the form of lemon juice. You can use vinegar too, but a lot of times that has a stronger flavor.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind that, to make sure you have enough acid in it so you can can it safely by a hot water bath.
So do you know roughly popularity-wise hot water bath versus the pressure?
So hot water bath is, most people like that.
Yeah.
Because people are scared of the pressure canners.
I was told to leave the house, basically. The kitchen doors were closed, and I think that was my mom's way of having some privacy from all the kids, more so than anything else. But I remember when the pressure cooker came upstairs, we were all
people
on
are
alert.
scared of the pressure canner. So hot water bath, you can safely do jams and jellies, any of your fruit products, your pickle products, and tomatoes, if you add the acid to the tomatoes. And then the other thing is here, you need to follow tested recipes. All those latest versions that you find floating out in the web, we don't recommend them because we don't know that they have the safe ingredients for hot water bath. And so just a quick thing on the salsa. I made a comment earlier that a lot of people like to make their own salsa, and that means how many peppers and onions and what they put in it. If you made your own recipe, the only safe method for processing that is to put it in the freezer.
Okay.
So you can't safely hot water bath that.
Okay.
And so the pressure canner, what you need that for is any of your vegetables, because we consider them low acid. And you can't add lemon juice to make them safe or vinegar. So any of your vegetables or your meats or any soups, anything like that, you have to pressure can. And so what we're trying to do when we're processing food at home is make a product that is as safe or safer than what you buy at the supermarket.
All right.
And so that's where our recommendations come from.
And that gives such a degree of confidence, a high degree of confidence that the material that is being sent out by NDSU, the Family and Community Wellness, and Rita, these are science-tested things.
Yeah.
And so, we don't have to depend on what's on Facebook, some of the goofy things. And so it just gives such an assurance that the material coming out of NDSU is science-based and safe. So it's an excellent resource to investigate.
And so, floating out there is, canning in your oven and canning in your wash machine and canning in your microwave.
And your dishwasher.
And your
I've seen that.
dishwasher. Those
Some
are
of those
totally
things are scary.
unsafe procedures. And so I've had to tell people they've had to throw 200 quarts of product away because they didn't follow recommendations.
Isn't that disappointing?
Yeah.
All that work.
And so all of our canning research is done at the University of Georgia at the National Home Food Preservation Site. So we take this very seriously because we want a safe product, because we don't want you being the cause that someone got sick or even could potentially die.
And because sometimes I will overhear, again, my office right across the hall, sometimes I'll overhear Rita with a phone conversation with someone who is having to throw out everything that they canned or processed because it wasn't done safely.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so important to get out ahead of all this.
Yeah. And you have all that anticipation for all that food that you think is going to be so great, and then it's all got to go down the drain.
Right. So we just talked about tomatoes, correct? But a lot of people put peppers in their salsa because that's, you need that peppers. And so my famous call is this: we want a really hot salsa. What can we do to make our salsa hot? Well, the recipe calls for a cup of peppers. I don't care what kind of variety of peppers you have in that, but you can't put 2 cups in.
Okay.
So you can have 3/4 cup of green pepper, and then put a ghost pepper in for the other 1/4 cup. If you really want it hot, that's the ghost pepper. And so it doesn't matter as long as you don't go over the amount of what the recipe.
Is that because it would affect the acidity or water down the acidity?
Because peppers are a low acid vegetable,
That
so we're
makes
putting
sense.
it with the acid. So the combination of the recipe has been determined to make it a safe recipe of the proportions of the tomatoes to the peppers or the celery.
So if you start monkeying around with that, it could make it unsafe,
It
less
does make
acid.
it less acid.
Yeah, I follow you. Sure.
So anyway, peppers, again, you got to time your pepper planting so the same time as your tomato planting, so they're ripe at the same times. And peppers take a little bit longer to grow and mature than tomatoes. And so again, you have to, in your mind, think, well, my tomatoes are done in August, but my peppers aren't done until the end of September. You kind of have a problem there. So again, we don't really have a variety of peppers because there's many types of peppers. I mean, there's bell peppers, there are jalapeno peppers, there are ghost peppers. And so depends on how hot you want it. We can go by the hotness of the pepper you plant. So the smaller the pepper plant, the hotter the pepper.
Yeah. Yeah. You get into those Carolina Reapers and things like that
Right.
are just really, really hot. Well, let's take a quick little break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about canning.
When you can't make it to City Hall or school board meetings, local journalists from Inforum.com will be there to report the facts and get your questions answered. Local news works for you. Stay up to date at Inforum.com.
Okay, we're back with Rita Ussatis, and we're talking about canning and looking at all the different aspects of canning from our vegetable garden. And we're talking about peppers. And I think when people talk about peppers, they want to know how hot is hot and how. So let's talk about, is it the Scoville units?
Right, the Scoville heat value. So
Yeah.
how do they determine that? How they determine that is they take the seeds of the peppers, and the hotter they are, it takes more sugar water to dilute it. So that's how this unit is measured. So
count the day lost. You don't learn something new. You see, I never knew that. I never knew that was how they determine the Scoville. I've heard of the unit, and I watched that Scoville units, but I didn't know that was how they tested it.
So bell peppers is the weakest pepper out there. And right now, the hottest pepper that we know of is the ghost pepper.
Okay.
But I have a little story about a habanero pepper.
Yes.
So this was in the 90s, and I was in a national meeting in Washington, D.C., and I personally don't like peppers at all.
Right.
So I was at this big banquet with extension agents from all over the United States, and I was picking out my green peppers out of my food. And I happened to have a county agent sitting across the the table for me from Louisiana. And he said, don't you like peppers? I said, no, I don't like peppers. He said, these are like nothing. He said, you should try a habanero. I said, I've never heard of a habanero. He said, I'll send you some. And I thought, sure, he'll never. Well, I get back from Washington, D.C. the next week in the mail, I have habanero plants.
Okay.
And seeds. So we planted them in the garden, and we had these little habanero peppers. And, obviously we had no idea. So I brought them home, and we were together with some friends. And my one friend said, well, there can't be that hot. So he popped one in his mouth.
Ooh, the whole thing.
The whole thing. And he was like, oh, my Lord, give me the milk. Give me the milk. Give me the milk.
At least they were smart enough to realize that they needed milk.
Yeah. So, habanero peppers are hot, and he ate the seeds and everything.
Oh, wow.
So the more seeds in it, the hotter it is. So, so that's my first run-in with habanero peppers. So anyway, be careful when you're working with the hot peppers because they will burn your skin or burn your mouth. So when you're canning, we actually tell you to wear some kind of plastic gloves.
I learned that
the hotter the pepper that you use. So
put this into context. Let's use the Scoville scale. So where does a habanero rank?
A habanero second to the top.
Really?
Yeah. So bell is at the bottom.
Yep.
Jalapeno is kind of in the middle. And then your jalapeno and ghost are the top ones.
Habanero and ghost.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So like, what's the number attached to that? Just to show.
So a bell pepper is 0.
Okay.
And a habanero is 100,000 to 300,000.
Okay. And what's a jalapeno? Do you have that on there?
Yeah.
Oh, do you have that number?
Jalapeno, yes, 2,500 to 5,000.
So that's a huge gap there between, and I used to think that jalapenos were hot. Like when growing up, I think that the peppers we're seeing more and more peppers, right? But I don't remember seeing anything beyond a jalapeno growing up, and so I thought that was super hot. Then you hear about the habanero, or then you hear about the other things like that, and then ghost, Carolina Reaper,
and so you
scorpions.
won't want a cup of ghost peppers in your salsa.
No,
so you might have a lot of internal problems with your digestion if you have that kind of
course, peppers have become so popular. There are so many new varieties that have been developed. For example, you mentioned jalapenos, and there are even within that jalapeno category, you'll see when you're looking at plants in the garden center or ordering seeds, there'll be different named varieties of jalapeno, and the description will vary a little bit, such as a mild jalapeno or a hotter jalapeno. So they've even tweaked each of these categories a little bit too. But it's interesting, Rita, you mentioned when you got those plants and planted them, that was almost like a novel thing in North Dakota. Yeah, growing up, in gardens, we planted nothing beyond bell peppers. And so it's interesting, but now peppers are really, really popular. Well, and it's interesting, the different Scoville units.
Yeah, and those habanero peppers took 100 days to mature. So we thought there's no way these are going to mature in North Dakota, because I actually lived in northern North Dakota at that time, but we pulled them out in October. And they matured and they were hot. And
again, it's recommended that, especially if you're working with these really, really hot peppers, you should wear gloves,
right?
Because it will really burn your skin. But what about if you're just there in the garden and you're just touching, you're not biting them? If you're on the exterior, are they?
That's fine.
Yeah.
It's when you cut them open and it's the seeds. Again, it's the seeds where the heat is in the peppers.
Is there anything to it? Like, are they? Is there? Vapor or aroma or anything like that that's like an irritant? I know they're very different than cutting onions, but like onions, you cut onions, you can have all kinds of reactions.
Yeah,
is there anything?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And so you mentioned the days and things to these. They've under each of these kind of categories, like the jalapeno and cayenne peppers, they've tweaked these with some named varieties. And so look carefully at the days, like you mentioned, Rita, because they've even developed some of these that are a shorter day than the long days, so that they're more likely to be ready when your tomatoes are for salsa. So like you mentioned, Rita, that's an important point, to try to time your tomatoes and your peppers so about the same days to maturity.
You said that you didn't like peppers. Has that changed at all?
No.
Okay. Don, how about you? What kind of peppers do you grow?
I can't take the real hot ones.
Okay.
We like some of those that are maybe a little more, could I say, flavorful than the bell?
Poblanos, maybe?
Yeah, but I didn't grow up with hot peppers, and I can't take anything real hot like that.
So if anyone eats with me, you'll notice that if there's any peppers, and I'm pulling it out.
Okay. Including bells?
Including bells.
There you go.
Any peppers being pulled out of my food. So if my mom happens to be listening to this, yes, Mom, I still do that.
Again, talking about, so obviously tomatoes, salsa is the big things to can, but I would also think that pickles.
A lot of people like their own pickles. And so this is like probably my biggest question for pickles is, why is my pickle soft? And like Don says, I ask them what kind of variety of pickle or cucumber did you plant? And usually they say, I don't know. I just bought one and planted it.
Yeah.
And there's definitely two types of cucumbers. Actually, there's three now. There's the pickling varieties, there's the slicing ones, and then there's the burpless ones. So you really want to take a look at those tags at the seed packet or at the store to make sure you're picking the right variety for what you want.
Right, and when you open a seed catalog and look at the cucumber section, it divides those into pickling types, slicing types, burpless types. So in the seed catalog, it is just differentiated. So it's not like one cucumber fits all. And so when you're looking also, if you're buying started cucumber plants, also you'd want to make sure you look carefully at that tag, like you say, Rita.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So a lot of people don't actually plant their own cucumbers, that they want to go to the farmer's market and buy them. So what you want to do at the farmer's market is make sure you're buying the same, pickling cucumbers or slicing cucumbers. And when you're actually looking at the cucumbers, pickling cucumbers are the shorter cucumbers, and they're kind of like a little bit chunkier.
Okay.
And again, slicing cucumbers are longer, and then your burpless ones are long, narrow ones. They get quite long at times. So again, if you're actually buying your cucumbers, make sure you're also buying the right variety.
Are burpless good for canning?
You can not make fermented pickles out of burpless, and by fermented, that's like the dill pickle.
Okay.
But the refrigerator pickles that a lot of people make, burpless will work for that.
Okay.
So if we kind of review again about, what are some actual cucumber varieties that would be good for pickling or some for slicing? Again, a very good resource to check out online would be Vegetable Cultivars for North Dakota 2024. That'll come up with this whole list, and you go to the cucumber section and you'll see names like for pickling, Calypso, Eureka, Homemade Pickles. That's a good name for a variety. Max Packs and Boston Pickling was a good old standard. That's still available. And then, of course, you'll also see the slicing, things like Sweet Success and Sweet Slice, ones like that. But again, the very important thing is to, when you're planting this spring, if you want to make pickles, make sure you've got a pickling variety. And slicing, we choose slicing varieties. And the importance of that, the seed companies put so much importance on that they differentiate them on their pages.
And so you just really want to look for whether it's a slicing pickle or a
to match
pickle.
The variety to the use that you want.
We did a concern with our tomatoes that you have to add acid.
Yep.
With pickles, we have to make sure we use the right acidity of vinegar. So when you're buying vinegar for your pickles, there's several varieties out there. There's one that's called the pickling vinegar, but that only has a 2% acidity in it, but that also has the sugar in it and some spices. We don't recommend that at this time. And then you really got to look on the label on the market on the bottle, because a lot of them are saying 4% acidity now, but you have to have a 5% acidity vinegar to make your product safe.
Really? Okay.
So when you're looking at vinegar, you can't just grab a jar off the shelf.
Just don't go by the title. You really have to read the label.
Read the label and make sure you get a 5% acidity again, and that's why you can hot water bath it.
Okay.
And so, to end my canning part of this whole thing, if you start with a good quality vegetable, tomato or pepper or cucumber, whatever that is, you should end up with a good quality product. But a lot of people try to take these products that aren't at the finest condition and think they should have a fantastic product. So we always say what you start with is what you're going to end up with. So always make sure you're starting with the good quality products. You should end up with a good quality product.
And so hopefully from today's discussion, we'll prevent some people when it comes canning time to do their canning, process their vegetables, pickles, and prevent them from not having a good product because they started with the wrong variety. So hopefully we've helped some people kind of steer away. So I hope this August you'll have less calls.
I do too, but if you are having problems, do feel free to reach out to us. That's what we do. So we try to help you walk through the steps and figure out why your product didn't turn out. But also go to NDSU Food Preservation on the website, and we have all kinds of listings of the safe recommendations there. But always feel free to call us at our office.
So what's your number and what's your email in case people have questions?
Okay, so my phone number is 701-241-5700, and my email address is Rita, Rita, .Ussatis, U-S-S as in Susan, A-T as in Tom, I-S as in Susan, at ndsu.edu.
And of course, we all love the calls and emails that we all get. But, wouldn't it be rewarding, though, if you have less calls, less emails from people that needed to dispose of all their product? Wouldn't that be nice if we'd save? Yes. But again, we love all the calls and emails that we get about these questions.
When I had to tell that gentleman to throw 200 quarts of products away, it was like, look at the cost that I just had him throw down the drain.
Yep. And the time.
And the time.
I mean, and you put the cost in with the time, but what other events do you have coming up? Or do you have other things coming up?
Yeah, so I have a couple programs, because in the world of family and community wellness, we're kind of all over the place. So I don't just do canning, but we have a series of programs that actually start on March 14th, and it runs every other week till the end of April. And we're working with the Alzheimer's Association, and we're presenting a webinar series on, warning signs of Alzheimer's, communicating with Alzheimer's, a healthy lifestyle with people with dementia or Alzheimer's. And simply go to our website, the NDSU Extension website, and there's a link to our programs on there, and you register. And you need to register for each one of the 4 separate, and then you will get a Zoom link on that. So again, we're just trying to making people aware of what to look for, and then some communication or healthy eating practices they can do to help prevent that in the future. And then we have another really fun program in April. It's called Stop the Bleed. And it's open to anyone. Again, we're really targeting the rural area, because if you really have an injury, you can die within 1 minute if you start bleeding. So we want to teach people how to put tourniquets on and some first aid. And we're working with the School of Nursing, NDSU School of Nursing, to provide these trainings. The dates are April 15th and 16th. If you attend that, you're going to go home with your own tourniquet kit, so you can have it. So in case you have that injury at wherever, you can hopefully save a life, and we're going to teach you how to do that. So again, that registration is also on our website.
Great. And Dawn, for you, if people have questions about getting seeds started for their salsa gardens or their peppers, or if they have any questions about anything growing related, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, spelled Kinzler, at ndsu.edu. And gosh, Rita, it's been great to have you. And now that all of us gardeners are going to start out with planting the right varieties, it'll be fun to have you back about canning time to remind us of some of the safety issues.
That would be nice. I'd like to do that.
Yeah,
so
let's do that.
Look forward to a future date with the podcast.
That'd be great. Well, thanks again for coming in.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good week.